A lot of people recommend Hongdae, MYEONGDONG, or Gangnam as great places to stay in Seoul, but my personal pick isn't among those three. And I'm about to take a deep dive into 9 different areas in Seoul that are great to stay at. So let's go! There are so many good neighborhoods in Seoul to stay in depending on what type of traveler you are. And in this video, instead of just sitting down in my house talking to the camera, let's actually go to each neighborhood and see what there is to do there, what types of places there are to stay at, and what type of traveler should stay there. Let's start in the northwestern neighborhood of Hongdae, in the Mapogu district. And before we start, you should know that most of the tourist places in Seoul are in the north-central JONGNO district, so keep that in mind when you make your selection. Hongdae is the best place in Seoul for young travelers to stay. It only takes about an hour on the airport railroad from Incheon to Hongdae. It's just one subway the whole way, and it has 2 really different atmospheres depending on if it's day or night. In the daytime, there are tons of trendy restaurants, cafes, clothing shops, gift shops, anime stores, arcades, and a lot more for people to check out while staying here. If you just think Korea's MZ generation, you can probably picture what type of place this is, and if it's the right fit for you. So Hongdae changes a lot at nighttime for sure. There's a ton of nightlife out here and it's pretty loud at night too, so it's something to consider when you're thinking of staying here. On weekends, the drinking can last until 7, 8 a.m. the next day, no problem. So if that's the kind of thing you're into, it's definitely the perfect spot for that, as there's a lot of bars and clubs and all that kind of stuff. But if you're looking for kind of more of a quiet place at night, it can be pretty loud here, so it's definitely something to consider. For places to stay, there are hostels for about $15 to $25 for a shared dorm, and a lot of them are for people looking to party, so they'll probably be pretty loud and wild, just so you know. However, there are also some quieter hostels nearby, so I just look at the reviews and pictures to find one best for you. If you're on the adventurous side, and on the tightest of budgets, you can always stay at a jjimjilbang or sauna, which can be found all over Korea and don't require reservations. The Hongdae 24-hour Bulgama sauna is just over $10 for a night on weekends, and even cheaper on weekdays. But you'll be sleeping in a public area with other people, so pack earplugs and a sleeping mask if you have one. If you're looking for something a bit more comfortable, there are also nicer hotels in Hongdae, such as the L7 Hotel or the Holiday Inn Express, which are both really close to the subway station. I'd recommend these for young travelers with a little bit of a bigger budget, because they are more expensive at about $120 a night, and to reserve a hostel or hotel in Korea, I would just go to Google Maps to find the best deals on different websites in your currency. It seems to compare a lot of the popular websites to each other to find the best deal. Now let's go to Sinchon, also in northwestern Seoul, just one subway stop away from Hongdae, or 15 minutes on foot. Sinchon definitely has more of a mellow vibe than Hongdae. It's filled with university students from Yonsei University, which is one of the top universities in Korea. And it has more of a Korean vibe overall rather than being a touristy place. There still are a lot of tourists here, but a bit less than Hongdae. It's another great place for young people to stay. You'll find some of the cheapest food options in Seoul here, while still maintaining decent quality. There is even a Tonkatsu or pork cutlet place for just 3,000 won, an absolute steal. There's also the big Hyundai department store in the Uplex, which holds interesting events from time to time, for tons of shopping catered towards young people. And Sinchon also has some great nightlife that's not as club focused, and more focused on Korean bars, also called sujibs. So Sinchon has a lot of love motels as well, which aren't as sketchy as they sound, but they might not be the best place to travel as a family. But luckily they are pretty cheap and they can go for about as low as $30 American. So if you're on a budget, they're a pretty good idea. I've stayed at a lot of them and they're not too bad. If you don't mind spending more money, there are also nicer hotels such as the H Avenue Hotel, which is closer to Idae Station, for about $60, and Ever 8 Service Residence for just under $100. There are also a fair amount of guest houses here, which seem to go as low as about $25 a night, but some of the nicer ones can easily be over $50 a night. Also, one thing to note is these guest houses will have less of a party vibe than Hongdae, and they'll be a little more relaxed overall. So if you're a single traveler looking for more of a relaxed atmosphere, this could be a really good place to stay. Now we have Seoul Station and the nearby City Hall, which is the most central point in Seoul that's closest on average to most tourist spots.
So you'd think Seoul Station will be one of the best places to stay just because it's so central and the transportation is so convenient. It is really easy to get to and from the airports from here with the Airport Express, and there's also the KTX trains here which go all over the country. Like you can go to the East Coast to a place like Gangnam or obviously Busan on the southeast coast. There's a few reasons why it's not the best place to stay. Although it is really convenient, it is more slummy around here, so probably not like the best place to walk around at nighttime, especially for single travelers or maybe if you're with a family or something. You also get things like protests. On the weekends there will be like hundreds of people around here. There's a lot of religious groups and cults and stuff like that. The location is perfect, but I definitely recommend other places to stay over Seoul Station.
There are definitely some nice sites around, such as the Seoullo 7017, which is a walkway over Seoul Station that gives you a great view of one of the biggest intersections in Korea. There's also Sungnyemun, the gate to Namdaemun that's the largest gate of its kind. And then right beside City Hall Station, you can find Deoksugung, a royal palace from the Joseon dynasty that was built in the 1400s and housed the Korean royal family until 1910. There are good facilities nearby, such as grocery stores, shopping, and nice restaurants, but I'd only really recommend staying nearby to families who are looking to spend a bit more money on a nicer hotel, such as the Courtyard by Marriott, which should be around $180 a night, and is in a nicer area overall. Now let's go to Itaewon, also in central Seoul, the International District.
So Itaewon is filled with a lot of international food that's really hard to find in other places in Korea. And there's also a lot of guest houses here and a pretty famous hotel. But there's not a lot of motels here in general, just a few here and there. But it's a very famous place for travelers to come.
Guest houses here are about $20 to $30, including Seoul Cube, which looks like a mix between a capsule hotel and a guest house that looks pretty comfortable. There are also hotels such as the Hamilton, which can be booked for under $100 a night and is right next to the subway station. Itaewon comes to life at nighttime with a ton of bars and clubs that cater a lot to foreigners and tourists. But I wouldn't strongly recommend staying here, unless you have a strict diet such as requiring a lot of halal or vegetarian options nearby. However, everyone has different needs, and there are definitely a lot of people that prefer to stay in Itaewon, so it's hard not to put it on my list of areas to stay. The next spot is MYEONGDONG, the shopping district also in central Seoul. This is typically the most recommended area to stay online, and for good reasons.
MYEONGDONG has been a tourist spot in Seoul since the early 2000s. It's been around forever, and it's most known for its shopping, to be honest. There's a bunch of cosmetics, K-pop stores, and that kind of stuff here. It's also really close to another market called Namdaemun, which pretty much sells everything, so you're in a really central location if you stay here.
MYEONGDONG is the spot for tourist hotels in Seoul. If you're traveling alone and don't want to stay at a hostel where you have to interact with other travelers, this would be one of my recommendations, just because of how many people are doing the same thing. The hotels here range in price drastically from about $40 all the way up to over $200, so you can take your pick as there are just so many options, and I don't really have any specific recommendations here. One thing to note is there are guest houses here too, but because of MYEONGDONG's popularity, they're similar in pricing to the tourist hotels. MYEONGDONG is also the most famous street food market at night, with a lot of variety that's marketed mainly towards tourists. And there's a good amount of international food around too, with lots of Japanese and Chinese restaurants, and even Din Tai Fung, the famous Taiwanese chain. Now we go up to JONGNO-gu, Seoul's district with most of the traditional culture, and the spot that I would personally stay in if I was coming to Korea for the first time.
So JONGNO-gu includes places like Gyeongbokgung Palace, Gwanghwamun Square, Bukchon Hanok Village, Cheonggyecheon Stream, which is right behind me. And then there's also Insadong, there's Chogyesa, the Buddhist temple, and Dongdaemun. So there's a lot of tourist places around here for people to see if you stay nearby.
This is one of the coolest areas that's a complete mix between traditional and modern Korea. You get ajushis playing changi in the park, which is Korea's version of chess, and then only a few blocks away, you're in one of Seoul's modern business districts. JONGNO-gu really captures the charm of Seoul the best, especially for first-time travelers to see. You can also find Ikseondong here, an older traditional Hanok village that's been completely transformed into a nice area with tons of restaurants and cafes. At nighttime, things come to life with the Ujiro Nogari Alley, where you can enjoy nogari or polak, chicken, and of course beer amongst Koreans in a bright and vibrant alleyway with a really good atmosphere. This is a place that you must go to if you've never been before. In JONGNO-gu, you can find guest houses for about $20 to $30, with another Seoul Cube branch as well. And if you're looking for hotels, you can find just about anything you can think of, from cheaper love motels starting all the way down at about $30 to luxury hotels such as the Four Seasons for over $500. If I were to choose one area in JONGNO-gu, I'd try and find a place near Chonggak or Gwanghwamun Station, as you'll have the most central location in terms of things to see and eat. Now we go to Seoul's hipster SEONGSU neighborhood in the northeast, nicknamed the Brooklyn of Seoul.
So now that Hongdae is known as kind of a big tourist area, a lot of young people come here instead, and a lot of shoe factories used to be here, which have been turned into like cafes, stores, and restaurants. And you can tell it's really popular because there's a ton of people here for sure.
If you want to see how Korea's hipsters hang out, SEONGSU is the place to go. Common Ground used to be one of the biggest landmarks here, which is a bunch of containers piled up on top of each other to make a shopping mall. But now the entire neighborhood has been transformed, with the red brick shoe factories being renovated into fancy cafes, vintage clothing shops, restaurants, and even local breweries. In fact, it's gotten so trendy that some of the European fashion brands are starting to notice it too. SEONGSU is not my style, to be honest, but for people that are really interested in how young, fashionable Koreans do things, I think it's really worth recommending. There aren't as many hotels here as places like MYEONGDONG or JONGNO, but there are affordable options like the Seoul Forest stay for about $15, and then mid-tier options in the H Avenue Hotel and Hotel Poco, which is right on the main street for less than $100. And then if you want to splurge, you can stay near Konkuk University Station at the classic 500 Pentaz Executive Residence. I'd try to stay as close to SEONGSU Station as possible, as you'll be closest to everything, and also walkable distance to the Dukseom Han River Park and Seoul Forest, which is one of my favorite parks in Seoul. You've probably heard of Gangnam, from Psy's big hit Gangnam Style in 2012. It's in southern Seoul, and is perfect for a very specific type of traveler.
If you're into fashion, pretty little cafes, and whatever's trendy on social media, then Gangnam is a place you should consider.
There are so many amazing restaurants, including some you might not expect, a ton of plastic surgery clinics, clothing stores, and cosmetic stores in Gangnam, and it has a bit more of an upscale vibe than the rest of Seoul. However, it's pretty far away from a lot of the traditional culture in northern Seoul, so I'd only recommend staying here if you just simply want to stay in Gangnam. Also, despite being mostly a luxury neighborhood, I managed to find a cheap hostel called Ya Korea, which is under $20 a night. And there are also motels and hotels starting at about $45, including the Toyoku Inn for about $50, which is one of my favorite hotel chains I've ever stayed in because it kind of feels like you're staying in Japan. And there's also a big breakfast buffet, which is nice because a lot of places in Korea open so late. And if you truly want to travel in luxury, try staying at the Joseon Palace for about $400 a night. And last but not least, let's go to southeastern Seoul and look at JAMSIL.
JAMSIL is an area in Seoul with a lot of newer infrastructure, and it's famous for the building behind me, which is the tallest building in all of Korea. Inside the Lotte World Tower, there's one of Seoul's most expensive hotels called the Sungnyemun. So if you have the money for that, that's a place you can stay. It looks like there's really nice views in all the rooms. I'll probably never get to check it out in my life, but maybe someday. But it also has a lot of other things for travelers to do, especially if you come as a family.
The Lotte World Tower is attached to the Lotte World Mall, one of the biggest malls in all of Korea, which has tons of restaurants, shopping for everyone of all ages, an indoor and outdoor theme park called Lotte World Adventure with a massive skating rink inside, and a nice lake to walk around for a stroll. And not every hotel is as expensive as the Sungnyemun, such as the Lotte Hotel World for about $225 a night, which I think is really good for families, and the Hotel Lake for those on a tighter budget at about $75 a night. I wouldn't strongly recommend JAMSIL for single travelers because you'll be so far out of the way, but it might be worth checking out for a night or two during your stay if you want to spend some time looking around. And for travelers on a tighter budget, there are also some love motels nearby for as cheap as $35 within a 5-minute walk of the Lotte World Mall. That's quite a steal for what you have access to be honest. And that'll do it for my recommendations of areas to stay in Seoul. As you've seen in this video, Seoul has some really diverse neighborhoods all over the city, suited to different types of travelers. And don't worry too much about accidentally picking the wrong neighborhood. No matter where you end up staying, you'll always be somewhat close to transportation to get around, and you might just find some hidden gems that you would have missed out on if you didn't stay there. Remember to check out our playlist for Korean travel tips that we'll keep updating over time. And if you liked the video, please press like and consider subscribing and joining our Patreon if you have the financial flexibility to do so. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you soon.